This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. And by the time you're seeing this, it's December 1st. I don't have any Christmas films planned, so I'm just going to keep going with the real life serial killer films. Because I did find a handful for free on YouTube. Except, I realized a lot of them are cut, maybe by 10 minutes or so, because it's YouTube. So I had to pass on some. But this is one that I was able to find uncut. And it is one that I wanted to see. Mainly I was kind of curious about the casting. But it's a case I'm probably obviously not as well versed as other ones like Bundy, Gacy, Dahmer, Kemper, Gein. But it's one I do know a lot of details about. Maybe not dates or aspects about the trial or arrests or life in prison. But I do know a lot of the main bullet points of this case. And I don't think I've done a killer couple yet. I have done the Hillside Stranglers, which is like a buddy buddy killers, excuse me, wow, but like a married couple. And there are films out there of some, so this will be the first of that kind, the killer married couple. And it's a film from, I don't even know what year, 2006. It is the film Karla, which of course, it's mainly about Karla Homolka, but really the crimes of Karla Homolka and her husband Paul Bernardo, aka the Ken&BarbieKillers. Probably one of the most notorious cases to come out of Canada, next to Robert William Pickton. There's a few that came out of Canada, but especially in the 90s, this was like a very sensational story. The film is told through Karla's point of view, so we don't really see a lot of Paul except for the criminal aspect of him. It does try to paint Karla in a more sympathetic light. It shows her as sympathetic to an extent, but it also kind of toes that line of is she or isn't she guilty? Because unlike a lot of couples like this, usually what you get is the wife or girlfriend will be suffering from some form or level of Stockholm syndrome, where she's sort of grown to trust her captor or abuser, or they're just really under the thumb of fear and intimidation. In this case, not so much. Karla Homolka is probably one of the poster children, a poster girl for hybristophilia. Now, I've seen that defined as like a fetish or attraction to violent criminals, but I've also seen it just to violent people. So, but the casting for this film, you have Laura Prepon, or Prepon, I've always said Prepon, Donna from that 70s show. She plays Karla, so I was kind of interested in that. You have Misha Collins as Paul Bernardo, which apparently I read that Misha Collins actually regrets doing this film, to the extent of he tells people not to watch it and tells people not to send him or bring him DVDs or photos of it for him to sign. And he doesn't do a good job. I mean, they probably could have done more of his dual personality, like him having to turn that charm on. But it really just shows him as this violent abuser, sexual sadist. That's kind of the note he plays throughout the film. Very little do we get to see him turn the charm on. In fact, there is a scene where Karla is seen reading American Psycho, which people have said that Paul was obsessed with the book, even calling it his Bible. But some people believe that it was actually Karla's copy and doubt he ever read it. So that was fine detail that I noticed. But that's kind of how I always thought of Paul Bernardo, is sort of like a Zach Morris meets Patrick Bateman. Obsessed with self-help gurus, kind of like Tony Robbins and get quick rich scams, but also with this horrific, you know, sexually sadistic side. And I will say, right up front, trigger warning, because not only are there victims, it shows 3 of their victims, 3 that we know of, because the 4 murders of the Ken and Barbie murders, there's 4, one of which is a Jane Doe, but the 3 that we see, 2 of them are 15, 1 is 14, and they are depicted that way. And it does get graphic. This movie's kind of a testament as to, you can make a movie shocking and disturbing and graphic and really stick with you with not showing that much. It's especially the most graphic and effective scene, where we're really just focusing on Karla's reaction to the thing, but it's the sound effects in the background, it's the sounds, the emotions we hear, the things that are said, that makes it effective. So I'm sure there'll be some people that will praise this film for going into the murders as in-depth as they do and making it graphic, not shying away from anything. But then I'm sure there's people that will say it's garbage because it doesn't go all out with it. To them, it's only shocking and disturbing if it's like a Serbian film. You got to show everything and make it as graphic as possible. Even though I think this is more graphic, because this doesn't feel like a shock value film. You feel the gravity of the situation with a movie like this. So, trigger warning now. It was directed by Joel Bender, who also wrote the film, along with Minette Rosen and Michael D. Sellers. Stars Laura Prepon, Misha Collins, Tess Harper, Anthony Dennison, Patrick Beauchot, which was he? I think he was the one. Sorry, I'm pausing, but I didn't do this ahead of time. Yes, he played Albert Fish in The Gray Man, which I've reviewed, which was the following year. I think he plays the Dr. Arnold. Yes, he does. Charles Mills did the cinematography, and Tim Jones did the music. And the music is sort of just ominous tones, really. But it's 102 minutes, and it's really told. It's kind of bookended with, and we go back periodically to, I think it's like 10 days before Karla's first parole hearing, which the film says October 15th, 2000. Wikipedia says May 11th, 2000. I'm going by what the film says, October 15th, 2000. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that date's correct. But it's her talking to this psychiatrist whose opinion will be given to the parole board. And it's sort of her telling the story to him, and that's what we see. So we don't get a lot of her backstory. We don't really get anything of Paul. Paul comes in right when they meet in 1987. She says she was 18, but she was 17. It kind of hints at him being the Scarborough rapist, which he was. I don't remember how many victims he actually had as the Scarborough. I know it was a pretty sizable amount that he ultimately got away with. I still don't think he's been convicted of anything. But it shows, she's really turned on by his sadistic side, and then it shows everything with her sister Tammy, and then how they got married, and how that just led to him bringing young girls home, videotaping everything, sexually abusing them, raping them, and eventually killing them. it tries to, and of course, this, I don't think it's so much that the film is trying to portray Karla in a sympathetic light or in a more victim sort of light. I think it's because we're essentially being told the story by Karla. Like, uh, the Dr. Albert character is sort of the audience stand-in. He's hearing the story just as we are. So, therefore, she's kind of an unreliable narrator. So, I don't think it's that the film is trying to portray her in a more positive, more of a victim role. That's just the way she's portraying herself. You know, if the film is through her eyes, of course she's going to be depicted more as a victim. So it's not so. I've read some reviews where people are mad at the film for trying to show her as more of a victim. When no, if if she's our narrator, if she's our storyteller, then it makes sense that it would. So, to me, I thought that made sense narratively. But I said Dr. Albert. I meant Dr. Arnold. Now, some names are changed. Of course, the finer details, like the arresting officers or the detectives or the lawyers, I don't really know those names, but then again, the movie doesn't really go into that much depth. I don't have any books specifically on them. I mean, they do have a part in this magazine I have where they're on the cover. Like Fred and Rosemary West, or Ian Brady, Myra Hindley, uh, Charles Starkweather, Carol Ann Fugate, you almost always see their names together. Even though Paul committed his own crimes, he didn't commit any murders outside of his marriage with Karla. So you almost always see them together. Now, Karla's chapter in this is more about Karla. The chapter in this is more about the both of them because, yeah, 3 of the 4 murders they committed at their home. So I don't have a whole lot. They also have a chapter in this, so I don't have a whole lot on them. But I've heard several podcast episodes. I've seen some. I don't know if there's like a Born to Kill or Minds of Monsters episodes, but documentaries like that I've seen. So I pretty much know the gist of the story, so I'm gonna try to go through the film the best I know. Now, performance-wise, the film works. I do think Laura Prepon works. You can tell she's really good at trying to portray that she's this unwilling, abused participant, but you can definitely see that darkness and lack of empathy behind her eyes. There are scenes we get where it really is hard to tell, film-wise. It is hard to tell if she's just trying to make Paul happy or if this is something she's actually getting off on. So I do think Laura Prepon does do a good job. I already forgot his name. Collins, Misha Collins, he does do a good job as Paul. I mean, you buy him as this sadistic, abusive, rich, preppy, almost frat boy like type killer who just at the drop of a hat, when he doesn't get what he wants, he just starts slapping and swinging. The only thing it really goes into, and it just barely outside of the uh, rapes and kills, is his whole get-rich scheme about smuggling cigarettes across the border. There's a couple scenes with that. That's really all it gets into. But it did leave some things out that I think would have really helped this film out. Which is, there's a scene when Karla, when the abuse is too much, she goes to police and says, I have a confession for all these murders. I didn't do it, but I was there, and I know who did. But can you give me immunity? I think in a way that did happen, but she did confess her her role in the murders to her family first. And of course, the first victim was her younger sister. That would have been a really powerful scene if they had showed that. Or, you know, it didn't really go into the controversy with the videotapes that were seized because Paul videotaped everything. Like every crime, like he wanted to relive every bit of sadism and crime that he committed. But to my understanding, there was something about how I think the Karla's lawyer or the defense lawyer found the tapes and kept them hidden for so long because they were going to use it for a cross-examination, which is very unethical. They were withholding evidence, which led to the controversy of Karla being given a plea deal, which then when the tapes came out and the tapes made her look like a very willing, encouraging participant, it caused extreme outrage in the media, the community. It didn't really delve into that at all. Really, once the murders end and we kind of see the downfall of their marriage and a little bit of the investigation, the film just kind of steamrolls right to the ending. And it doesn't really get into much other than that. But, so, I can see why people might like this movie more than others, because it pretty much just is about the murders. And it does go in pretty in depth with how these girls were abducted, kind of what they did to them. And it's pretty accurate. That's one thing I didn't mention is, from what I can tell, everything dealing with the abductions and the murders, other than the names of the victims, it's pretty accurate. So, I do give it credit for that. So I can see people praising certain kinds of people, praising this movie more just because it focuses on the murders more. It's a bit more graphic, a bit more shocking and disturbing. I mean, go look at how many views the most shocking, disturbing horror movie reviews have. They have more views than any other review out there. That's what people want to see. And I'm sure there are people out there that will say this movie's very tame because it has to be right in your face like Serbian film to be shocking and disturbing. But it's well acted. It kind of feels like a TV film at some points. Just the way it looks, the way it's shot, the way shots are composed, or the way it looks, kind of the cinematography, the look of it. It has this very TV movie feel. Some of the acting has a bit of a TV movie feel. But it's still solidly made. There's really not a whole lot that I can say about it. Sorry, I was reading about something. But yeah, there were some things that were left out that I think would have been really interesting for them to delve into, like Karla confessing to her parents, stuff like that. I don't know if I would call this a bullet point film. Not really, because I don't really know if this case has kind of a well-known bullet points that like a Bundy or Dahmer film would have. But yeah, I'm just going to start repeating myself at this point. But it's well made, it's well acted. It shows the murders in decent detail. It definitely doesn't shy back from trying to make it as graphic as it can without really showing anything. You really feel the gravity of the situation. It really plays with your mind as to, which side are you on? Was Karla forced into this, or was she willing the whole time? Was it sort of a downhill sort of descension into hell for her? Maybe that's the whole point of the film, and I do think it was a smart choice to kind of try to show Karla as this sympathetic victim character because it's told through her point of view. If this was a more fly on the wall, it wasn't her telling the story, then I could see that being a bit, I don't know if sensational is the word, but then I could see people having a problem with that. But where she's the unreliable narrator, it makes sense. So it's on YouTube. If you're into true crime, definitely check it out. And if you haven't read or seen anything on them, I think there's a book called Deal with the Devil, because that was kind of the headline when the whole news of the plea deal came out. They were calling it The Deal with the Devil. But so not too much to say about the movie itself. I know I've already gone on for 20 minutes, but so I guess we'll go on to the cliff notes and then the film itself. So as always, I just like to give a brief cliff notes or like a brief summary about the killer that the film is about. So Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo, known as Canada's Ken&BarbieKillers, were married June 29th, 1991 until 1994. And in that time, Paul, who has already committed crimes as the Scarborough rapist, abducted, sexually tortured, and killed 4 teenage girls, one of which was Karla's own 15-year-old sister Tammy on Christmas Eve 1990. They would videotape these crimes and often keep their captives for up to 24 hours. Despite their image of the ideal, young, attractive, married couple, Paul was a sexual sadist even towards his wife. However, unlike cases of Stockholm Syndrome, Karla was a hybristophiliac who was attracted to and encouraged Paul's sadistic behavior. When the abuse became too much, Karla sought help, and around the same time, DNA linked Paul to the murders. Karla, passing herself off as an unwilling participant under intimidation, entered a plea deal to confess against Paul and get a lighter sentence. However, the tapes came to the attention of the court and authorities after the plea deal was made. These tapes show Karla in a more willing and encouraging role. This cited outrage and controversy, and the case became a media sensation. Paul was convicted of two of the 4 murders and sentenced to life. Karla served her full lowered sentence of 12 years and released in 2005. Despite the parole board and psychological assessments stating they still feel she is a remorseless psychopathic threat. And so now we get into the film itself, which it opens up with... I was kind of confused by this because it opened up with the prison, which the prison was the Regional Psychiatric Center in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. But I always read she was at some women's prison somewhere else. But then at the end of the film, it shows her getting in a car and leaving, which made me wonder, why did she go to that prison for the assessment? Why could the doctor just go to her? I don't know. In fact, I think this was the prison, because when I was sending out letters to all these notorious killers to see who would write back, Paul Bernardo was one of them, and I'm pretty sure this was the prison. No, because I think he's in Millhaven, so I think at one point it was the same prison he was at. But again, it says October 15th, 2000, but then Wikipedia says May 11th for some reason. But Karla is being evaluated for parole. She says she got a degree while in prison, which she did take courses in psychology while she was in prison. She starts with how she met Paul. She says when she was 18 in Toronto. It was in Toronto, but she was 17. It shows how they were immediately attracted to each other, had sex the day they met, which I think happened. Shows that she encouraged his sexual sadism. True. Even upon, like, the first time they had sex, he talks about how he's, like, being rough with her, calling himself a rapist, and she's getting all into it. She says he was already raping young girls before they met. True. Scarborough rapist, which I think she even says that. It shows him being questioned. True, he was. Which, there's another point in the film where when he's questioned for the current Ken and Barbie murders, he even says, oh, this has already happened. I was already questioned for the Scarborough cases. Just to show how pompous and confident and weirdly manipulative he is. Uh, she says she wasn't jealous of Tammy, but he says he wanted her because she was a virgin. He wanted something pure. Uh, and Karla wasn't when they met, which is partially true because uh, uh, Dr. Arnold starts talking about Tammy, and you can feel the total shift, like she doesn't want to. Um, so yeah, she says she wasn't jealous. There was always some jealousy there, and some people believe that the reason why she was so compliant in these murders, especially the one with Tammy, was to sort of get them off his radar, and so that he'll focus more on her. And Tammy, he was obsessed with her 15-year-old sister. It kind of sheds light on that. Like, it shows her getting really mad at him because they hung out at the mall for 8 hours. He was getting very close to Tammy, but it very lightly shows that. But it doesn't go fully in depth because, according to Karla, he told her, "You owe it to me. You owe her virginity to me since you lost yours before we met." Which, if they had just added that line, it really would have just amplified the just the sociopathy and narcissism of this I say character, this person. Uh, so it shows her working in the vet clinic, which she did, and getting the of halothane. I've read halothane and I've read halcyon. Don't know if they're similar, but she took that from the vet clinic. They used that to knock her out. It shows. I do like how it goes kind of back and forth between the handheld video footage and the actual movie. Kind of makes it sort of like the home invasion bit from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. It shows how they just keep putting this halothane or halcyon in her drinks until she passes out. Now, I didn't mention that Laura Prepon kind of does look like Karla, mostly just in like the early 90s stuff, like this Christmas Eve scene where she's got like the really bushy, curly, like bangs and the straight hair. Other than that, not really. When she just has her straight hair, she kind of just looks like later seasons Donna for that 70s show. Uh, Misha Collins doesn't quite look like Paul Bernardo, but the actress that plays Tammy, which I do want to get her name because she really looks like Tammy. Sherilyn Hayers, at least the pictures I've seen of Tammy, she really looks like her. So then she passes out. They get the camera. Paul takes her virginity. And then he forces Karla to start doing stuff to her. But she notices that she's not breathing because she's also holding the rag soaked in halcyon on her face. Which it does show that she has a red mark, like a burn. The movie never addresses it. But after they called someone, they said, oh, it was a drag mark from dragging her to bed or something. But they saw it was a burn from the drug. Now, in real life, Karla's parents and other siblings were home and asleep while this was going on. The movie makes it look like it's their house and Tammy just happens to be over. But I think it actually went on for a while, and in real life, I think Karla was way more compliant and willing. Of course, the movie makes it look like she doesn't really want to do it, but... So yeah, they call the cops. Of course, they act shocked, and they say that she might have had too much to drink because the Homokas always allow the teenage kids to have a couple alcoholic beverages on Christmas Eve, so that was kind of their cover. No dates. There's no date or timestamps or anything in this film, but it was Christmas Eve, 1990. In real life, she got sick in her sleep, I think. Or she got really sick, passed out, and then died in her sleep. Whereas in the movie, she's just kind of, and then that's it. It does show the fireside chat video, which it shows a few weeks later, I think 3 weeks after Tammy's murder. It shows, very briefly, it shows Paul and Karla being intimate. In the film, it shows her going down on him. But she picks up a rose and is like, I really liked what we did to Tammy. Uh, I did it to make you happy. We're gonna go place this rose on her grave. And just getting more morbid about it. In real life, the real video, she does brag more about enjoying what she did. She even wears Tammy's clothes, talks and acts like her, and then they have sex in her bed. Yeah, because I think they were still living with her family at the time. So it briefly shows the fireside chat video. That's really the scene where you kind of got to think, okay, is she doing this to make Paul happy, or does she really believe this? And because Laura Prepon does have this intense look, and throughout the whole movie she does have this sort of vacant darkness to her, that it is kind of hard to tell. It does show that Paul even shows the Christmas video to friends. I don't think of the assault, but sort of like that moment where she passes out and dies. He's like, she was right here. I was right there when it happened. One friend talks to him about smuggling cigarettes across the border for money, because of taxes. So they start doing that. True, he was doing that as early as 1990. Karla says he raped at least 4 girls during their time together. It shows him attacking one while outside. I think that's supposed to be the Jane Doe. And then he just comes home and says he raped a girl. And then Karla gets turned on. They start making out and having sex. So I think that's supposed to be the Jane Doe of the 4 while they were together. In her voiceover, it makes her sound like she's mad about his raping and cheating, but she goes along with it. Like, she just kind of lays there as if she knows it's happening, but she's not going to say anything because she wants him to be happy. So then it shows him watching this young girl who's just been locked out of her house, late coming home, so the door's locked. He approaches her, or he's out back, and she catches him, and he pretends that he wanted to break into the neighbor's house. I think she asks for a cigarette, so they go out to his car, and then that's when he comes up behind her with a knife and abducts her. She says her name is Tina McCarthy. Oh, then he abducts her. We see her blindfolded while being videotaped. Implied hours have gone by. Paul brings Karla into the room. Tina says she wants to see her little brother again. Paul strangles her after forcing Karla to do some stuff with her. Now, this is based on the murder of Leslie McAfee, which was on June 14th of 91. The abduction is pretty accurate to what really happened. Missed curfew, door locked, pretended to break into the neighbor's house, went back to the car, he abducted her, brought her back home. I think he had been sexually torturing her like all night. They kept her for like 24 hours total. And then at one point, he brought Karla in. She started doing stuff to her. Of course, the movie downplays her role a bit. She does say she wants to see her little brother again. I do remember reading that somewhere. But Karla takes her blindfold off. And then she opens her eyes. Then that's when Paul realizes we have to kill her because she saw us. In real life, Lisa herself said, my blindfold is slipping. Well, I read that, then I also read that Karla was afraid her blindfold might have lifted. And so then that's when Paul decides to kill her. Which, according to Homolka, he attempted to strangle her twice with an electrical cord. The movie does show that. Uh, so it still shows her being an unwilling participant or barely anything happening. From what I've heard, Karla really was doing a lot more than just barely touching her a bit. But as far as the abduction and everything, very accurate. The next day while at work, uh, Paul goes to pick her up. And I don't know if he picked her up, but during the day he had dismembered her body and put it in blocks of cement. Now, he did come up with that idea the next day while she was at work, but it doesn't show, or maybe it was 2 days later, because the next day they hosted dinner for her family while Lisa's body was downstairs in the basement, and Karla had to keep her mom from going down there. That's another scene it could have showed, but it didn't show that. Uh, it shows them getting married, which was June 29th of 91. Just a week after Leslie's murder. Karla says it was 2 weeks later. Her mom mentions that a chopped up body was found by the lake and identified, which Leslie's body was found actually the day of the wedding, June 29th of 91. And she was ID'd by braces and dental records. She doesn't quite look 14, but the next victim does, and that's the more graphic one. So, it shows Paul continuing to have sex with other women, like friends that they bring over, and Karla just letting it happen. A fight breaks out with his friends for telling him, hey, stop treating your wife like this. I think I've heard stuff like that. For Easter, Karla suggests, hey, we got 3 days together. Why don't we play around a bit? So it shows them cruising around. Paul picks one out. They stop to ask for directions. Oh, wait, I went too far. Stop to ask for directions. And then Paul gets out. He puts a knife up to her, puts her in the front seat. Karla holds her from the back seat. They bring her back home. And this is based on the murder of 15-year-old Kristen French, which was April 16th, 92. She's called Caitlin Ross in this film. But pretty accurate portrayal of the abduction, how they abducted her. They notice that her shoe was gone, and when they notice it, it shows the cops by the abduction site holding it. I don't know if that is an actual detail that police found a shoe, but it was a pretty residential area in broad daylight, and I guess a number of people saw it happen. But then later, we hear the police say that it was the 16th, the Thursday before Easter, which it was. They videotape her as well. She refuses to cooperate. She even says some things are worth dying for, which was a line from a videotape or the videotape of Kristen French, which of course then Paul beats her for. She doesn't say the line, something to the effect of, I don't know how your wife can stand being around you. I guess she was known to be very resistant, uncooperative, and willing to put up a fight. The movie, not so much. I mean, she says that line, but then she kind of gives in. And this is the graphic scene, because we focus on Karla's sort of shocked reaction, but we hear the sounds, the grunts, the motions, and Kristen sobbing, having to say, like, you're my master, I'm your slut, all this horrific stuff, as we just slowly zoom in on Karla. Now, the way I explain it might sound graphic, but the way it's actually put together, it's actually more graphic and unsettling than a lot of rape scenes in horror films that are deliberately trying to be shocking. Especially since they really push it on you that this girl's 15. She looks it. They talk about her school, and her parents come on the news. there is kind of a heart-to-heart between Kristen and Karla, where he beats Karla. She's like, "Does this happen all the time? Well, why don't you just leave?" I don't know if she ever got close with the girls. Uh, it shows that they put her in the closet overnight. Uh, but then it shows Paul strangling her the next day. Uh, it says that the Green Ribbon Task Force finds Caitlin Ross out in the woods. In real life, she was found in a ditch on April 29th. Named after the Green Ribbon of Hope from her Holy Cross secondary school, which I think the task force was just formed at this time, and it was named that because of uh, Kristen Ross's school. Kristen French, excuse me. Paul is questioned. He even says that this has happened before. I was questioned for the Scarborough rapist case, kind of flaunting it, which was true. They thought he was too unlikely, so they let him go. Paul severely beats Karla with a flashlight, which the film depicts that they almost got caught at the border with cigarettes, so that he beats her with a flashlight. Karla says that this was in July, but the severe flashlight beating was actually in late December. And I think it was at home, not out on the road like that. But the thing about that is she then calls her mom to come and get her, which her mom does, but then she decides to stay. Now, in real life, after that beating, she had 2 black eyes, all beaten up. She went to work that Monday. Co-workers knew something was up, so they called her mom. Her parents came to get her. They picked her up, took her to the hospital, and that's when she filed charges. Said she was a battered spouse, filed charges. They kind of split this up into 2 separate events in the film, because they do that, but she decides to stay. He then throws her down in the basement, nearly beats her, kicks her to death. She does go to work, but her co-workers call her mom. Then her mom goes to pick her up, and we see her with the black eyes. So yeah, I think they kind of split it between 2 different events. Paul is arrested. She says they held him for 1 day. They took DNA samples. It's true, he was arrested on February 17th of 93, but I don't know if they held him for 1 day, but I know they took DNA. Karla confesses Paul's guilt to the police. She entered a plea deal. I'm not sure if it played out that way, but I do know that she confessed to her family first, which, that would have been a powerful scene. I think it was actually in a letter, or she could, because I think in the letter she was like, 3 years ago you lost one daughter, now you're about to lose another one because I'm the reason you lost the first one. Something to that effect, but they didn't put that in the film. Paul makes an apology videotape where he sobs, I guess it was like a 45-minute tape. Attempts suicide by stabbing himself, but he can't do it. He did make a apology tape that was played in court. There was a transcript. I've heard something about suicide. Obviously, he didn't actually do it. Paul is arrested at his home. It shows their trial. Paul is convicted of 2 counts of murder. Due to Karla's plea bargain, she got 12 years, which is true. But Paul also got 2 counts of kidnapping, aggravated assault, forcible confinement, and also brought nothing about the controversy about the plea bargain or the tapes being used to really conflict her story about being an unwilling participant under intimidation of abuse, and the tapes depicting her as sort of a gleeful partner. So then it just, she parts ways from the doctor, where he says, well, there'll be a parole meeting in 10 days, and we'll see what happens. So the end text says that Karla is a person who is highly artificial, articulate, uh, manipulative, egocentric, if not narcissistic, and whose behavior cannot be explained solely on the basis of intimidation or abuse by Paul Bernardo, which I have read. I've also read, and I think this is kind of a tweaked quote a bit. Despite her ability to present herself well, there is a moral vacuity and absence of empathy for her victims, which suggests tendencies towards psychosis. I think that was part of a psychological assessment rather than like a parole review. But so I have read quotes like that before. But other analysts say she's essentially an anomaly. They have no idea how to describe her. And then others say she's just a classic hybristophiliac. Then it says she was denied parole, and while in prison, she had a romantic relationship with a man convicted of killing his girlfriend. True, his name was Jean-Paul Gervais. Says she was released in July 4th, 2005. Still seen as a threat, citing her lack of remorse and empathy, and imposed restrictions on her freedom. True, she was released. I think she relocated. I think she went to Quebec. Actually, married her lawyer's brother. Excuse me. I don't. I'm not sure what kind of restrictions, like probation, parole, or some kind of registry. I don't remember. But I do know that she got out 2005, moved to Quebec, and remarried. Also says that at the time of the film, she has not apologized or shown any regret or tried to communicate or correspond with any families of the victims. And that's Karla. So, I mean, the things it does show are pretty accurate. More so the stuff with how the girls were abducted. I mean, that's very accurate. Some small details, like her reading American Psycho, or small things like how he admitted to the police that, oh yeah, I was already questioned for this. They questioned me for a completely unrelated series of rape cases. But I do kind of wish that it showed more stuff that could have been more powerful, like her confessing to her family, or the controversy of the plea deal, the effect of the families that the plea deal had, the effect of her family when they found out Tammy was killed by her and Paul. Her family did seem kind of ineffective. I'm not sure what her family was like, but when they go to pick her up, Paul is yelling horrible things and throwing her clothes at her down the stairs. And even her dad's just kind of standing there. It's well acted, especially by Laura Prepon and Amisha Collins. Their performances worked, especially Laura Prepon. She definitely has that mystique, like, to her eyes, where you really can't tell if she is in on it because she likes it, or if she is under intimidation and she is the victim that she says she is. It's decently made. I mean, it's not a bad movie by any means, but it does kind of feel more like a TV movie at times. But I was surprised with it. Especially movies around this time. Well, probably before last month, I would have said most of the movies in this period are very inaccurate and usually pretty bad. But I've seen accuracy in quite a bit of them. And this one was no exception. So it's on YouTube. You can go check it out for free. I'm glad I did. Did I really learn anything? Not so much. I mean, it pretty much is all stuff that I've either read in books like this or in podcast episodes that I listen to. Not that it really shed any light on any kind of new stuff. But then again, I don't think there's any other movies about Ken and Barbie, so I mean, maybe if there was more of them, and then it just showed the same stuff over and over again. But still, not that really shed light on anything. It doesn't really go into depth in anything other than the abductions and murders itself. Not really anything like before they met, or Paul's life at all. Really just well, I guess it makes sense. We only see of Paul really what Karla did, since the movie's told through her perspective. But it's decently made. It's a decent movie, fairly accurate. So yeah, I could recommend it. So I don't really have any Christmas movies planned, so I might just keep this going until I come across a Christmas movie. So not sure what ones I'll be doing next. Like I said, a lot of the ones on YouTube have been cut, so I kind of have to skip them. But not sure what ones I'll do next. But in any case, stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.